as weird as it sounds, we could probably use Olympic standards or something to determine whether or not a trans woman should be in a cisgender women prison or with cis men, I guess, maybe. So like if you've been on hormones for 1 year or 2 years or something, then maybe you should be able to, or if you're in the process of transitioning, maybe you should be able to. Maybe some answer like that would be my guess. But the problem you'd have to face on the other side, though, is that if you put somebody that's just beginning a transition into a cisgender prison, that person probably, actually I know they do, it's like 13 times higher risk of facing some sort of violent action in prison as opposed to a cisgender person. So, I mean, you have to face that as well.
I would probably be okay with those types of standards. I think that the biggest fear that we are dealing with when we talk about these issues is whether biological women are going to be put into harm's way. I think we should at least address that. I think that going under hormone therapy, transitionary surgery, and making sure that you have an accurate notation from a therapist, I believe goes a long way in alleviating a lot of those fears for both biological and trans women.
I would go with, we should do whatever is required for the safety of each inmates, which if that includes having different sexes or different weight classes of prison things, like that's fine. I mean, whatever benefits the most safety. I haven't looked at all into the evidence. at all into the evidence of what would benefit the most safety, but whatever should, more safety, good.
I think that prisons should be boring and not dangerous in the sense that you're at risk, that anybody is at risk from assault or whatever. So maybe we should bring back some of like the asylum type prisons, and maybe that would be the solution. I don't know.
We got another question that was submitted, was whether or not, or I should say what age trans children would be able to use hormone therapy.
That is another hard question. We are dealing with people who can't consent themselves. And so you need to follow the guidance of both your child on one hand, and then the doctors and the people who know what they're doing on the other. We are dealing with a feelings-based issue, which tends to be very subjective. And so when your child is coming to you and complaining and crying, I assume it breaks your heart. And so without jumping into anything, without pushing anything on the children, and also another fear, I believe that you can take them to a viable therapist that will eliminate if there are any other problems along the way. And then I also think there is a sliding scale of how much you should actually do. So we shouldn't be putting children on hormones because children don't produce hormones. And so you want to actively look at how a puberty would go and try to mirror those effects.
I think when it comes to children's medical decisions, I think it should be left to the doctors and the parents, and ideally the children as well. The idea that we would place some state restriction on some types of healthcare for children when children should have access to all the healthcare they need, I think is pretty silly. I think that should be a decision left to whatever team of counselors or psychologists are working with the child and the parents, and I don't think there needs to be a state intervention there to determine that there needs to be some minimum age before somebody can access some sort of medical treatment.
From my understanding on the topic, of the people who do transition, a very small percent regret the transition, but of the people who feel dysphoric and in some way desire a transition, a large percent have a remission rate of that desire when measured as kids. So it seems like, based on the science, there is probably some age at which we should wait until they reach this age before we actually allow them to have a permanent surgery transition, because there is such a high percent of people who initially want that who inevitably change their mind. But at the same time, because the surgery is so expensive right now, it seems like of the people who do transition, a very small percent of them regret it. So it's a hard thing to assess, but I'd leave it up to the scientists, and I'd say, yeah, we probably should establish an age. I'd probably go with age of consent, 16 or something around there, just as a easy baseline until we have harder science on the topic.
First of all, I take issue with the notion that it's hormone therapy, because therapy has connotations of helping people. I think it's more like hormone shenanigans. And I think that definitely the father frequently is left out or forced out of these decisions, and the father is being called frequently like harmful to the kid, when I think the other way, the opposite is happening. The harm to the kid is pushed by the mother or whoever, the doctors, the people at schools with an agenda. So, and I see even in the media, like I saw this headline from Yahoo News, transgender children who start hormone treatment during adolescence experience better mental health than those who wait until adulthood, according to some study. So it makes me just weary that people are deferring more and more to scientists or so-called scientists and psychologists and all that stuff, when at one point we deferred to men, fathers, God, pastors, who, in a way, they've lost their authority because people are so weak today. But I don't think that it should be. I just don't think that it should be before 18. But definitely, the fathers need to be involved.
I just want to talk about this notion of it being pushed, because I think it is a fear that I think can be alleviated with conversation, because I think there is a narrative out there that it is the liberal mom trying to push the gender theory onto their child. I have found the complete opposite. I understand that experience is anything else but hearsay, but in my own experience, I have found that it's coming out to both parents. Sometimes, especially as a male to female, I think it's hard to come out to the father figure because you are leaving the male gender. And yet, I think we can include the dad. We can make sure that they are following the right procedures and making sure the child comes out as a healthy, functioning adult.
You're saying that you've seen fathers pushing it on the kids, or going along with the kids more
I
than
have
the mothers?
seen almost universally that it is the child being, or whoever is transitioning, very hesitant. They're not excited.
Hesitant to talk to the father.
Yeah, not like, hey, mom and dad, I'm transgender. It generally, it is a situation that you need to talk out, that a lot of times I feel that a parent may be feeling like they're losing a child, and so you need to have those conversations. But I feel like I came the other way around to the point that I now have a better relationship with my parents than before.
Question for you. If it was proven beyond just the bias of the scientists, but in reality that they did lead healthier lives if they were
I still don't think I would, honestly. Because I think that there are other ways, because what we're addressing is like mental health of the person, right? So-called, and even I take issue with the term mental health, really. But I don't think that I would be for that, because it seems like a false solution to a symptom rather than the root issue, if that makes sense. Like the root issue, you deal with it. A lot of people get twisted in all kinds of different ways. We all have our issues, and many times we just don't overcome them. But to prop this up as something right that we should go along with, when honestly it just feels like insanity,
Question about that.
Yeah.
When you say the real issue, isn't the root issue quality of life? And so if they have a lower quality of life, whatever helps them to have a benefit of quality of life is solving the root issue, regardless of whether or not that ties into some kind of biology or not. Even if it's completely not connected to biology in any way, like say they wanted to install a horn on their head or something, if that improves their quality of life, isn't that solving the root issue?
I don't say so, because that's like the horn on the head. It's like a silly solution. Like you need to. The solution is to be like a piece of reality, where we all have our issues and we need to overcome them, or just keep them within and just be quiet, stay in the closet, if you will, with our issues, and have some shame and dignity, show respect for others by hiding your issues.
That seems really immoral to me, because it seems like you're saying that people should be enslaved to reality in the way that reality has forced whatever on them, like if they're paraplegic or whatever, instead of using technology to overcome reality to better fit people's mental state. So to me, it seems like the moral thing to do would be to change biology reality in whatever way we can in order to make it more comfortable for people, like we do with all technology. Why would we defer to biology or reality, and how is that not just an appeal to nature fallacy?
Well, the paraplegic thing it's like a totally different issue, clearly, because that's not a state of mind or a state of the soul or whatever.
Well, isn't that, it's affecting the state of mind, so the reason they would...
It does affect them, yeah.
Well, the reason they would not want to be paraplegic is because they'd be happier if they wouldn't, so isn't it giving them the ability to not be paraplegic, how is that any different from somebody giving them the ability to feel more comfortable with themselves by having a horn or any other surgery?
But more important too, like what I know that you know is like your state of mind is very powerful in changing your sense of sense of well-being, even in a rough situation. Like, we can look at somebody who's paraplegic and they can be happy and fulfilled, and then we're feeling sorry for them, but they're not necessarily going through what we're going through in looking at them.
For some, but others not
Right.
so much.
But that's what I mean is, like, those are some of the ways, like, healing the mind and the soul is much more important than addressing the physical things that can give you some, make your life nicer. But it's
Shouldn't
not
that be up to
the
them?
real-
Like, because some people may want to find solace in their internal strife, like monks did. They gained from the suffering. But some other people may like, no, I'd rather walk. Shouldn't they have the freedom to choose that? Isn't that the moral thing to do, to give them that option?
Yeah, I'm not going to impose on somebody who's an adult wanting to do this, but I do question the doctors who are doing this with the transgenders. I mean, we're supposed to do no harm, but yet they're justifying through these different studies that, oh, this is not doing harm, but I think that it is.
Well, that's my question is, if it improves their well-being, that seems to be the opposite of doing harm.
But I don't believe that that's well-being, really, because that's that's propping up, making them feel better for being wrong, if that makes sense.
Don't you think it's kind of like somebody basically has to be bought into your religious outlook, otherwise they're going to totally disagree with you? Isn't that a problem?
But honestly, it's not just a religious outlook, it's also like a commonsensical outlook.
Okay, so common sense, if we're having a disagreement of common sense, then we need to appeal to something besides our common sense, right?
I suppose so.
So if I'm not a religious person and I don't think that there's some fundamental good of the Father or Christ or God or whatever,
Yeah.
and you see somebody that is in distress, right? Like, I don't think T-Jump is immoral because he wears glasses, right, to make an adaptation to his body to better fit, like the world we have.
Right.
So could you not argue similarly for trans people that feel like their brain is miswired in some way? It seems like it's really hard to move the brain over to the body. Like, we haven't been able to do that in therapy yet, and I believe a lot of people would like that. I think most trans people would like it if they could just make their brain match their body and not have to worry about that, right?
Yeah.
So if it is the case that the only way to improve their outcomes, which is what therapy is something where you have a treatment that improves the outcomes relative to the risk of the treatment. So if we do have something that we can use, like either surgeries or hormones, wouldn't it be good to have people have the option to pursue those?
I'm not standing in the way of them doing it. I just question the wisdom and the decency of the doctors and the people who are purporting to be on their side, when in reality, I think that they're wolves in sheep's clothing, like, even if they're not aware of it, because they're thinking that they're helping, but in reality, a lot of this stuff is not actually helping.
Can I ask, do you believe that the psychiatrists and the medical health doctors en masse are conspiring to push this as the...
I don't think it's a conspiring, because conspiracy means secretive, when in reality they're just openly for it. I think that people, in general, all people are deluded. We all have to overcome our delusions, or don't. Most of the time, we never overcome them. And so I think that we have a culture where this is pushed, and so, like, in a lot of ways, there's pressure from their sellers. It's kind of like the emperor who has no clothes. Everybody was afraid to say the emperor has no clothes except a little child. So it's kind of that. I feel like it's somewhat that situation.
What is your standard for assessing what health is? Because to me, it's mental well-being, happiness. You're saying that even though it may give them greater mental well-being and happiness, it's
I think there's
not
another way.
What is the other way?
I don't know, but the same thing that we all have to go through. We all have to. We all have issues that we just can't overcome, and we have to deal with them, mitigate them, hide them, stuff like that.
Do you think that all forms of mental health are like fake diseases? So like ADHD is fake and schizophrenia is fake and all that. Do you think that none of these are real, that all of these can be overcome without any sort of like therapeutic assistance?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
But it sounds like you're saying you just need to take the burden. I mean, shouldn't we be trying to figure out how we overcome? So an example I will give is that the diagnosis is gender dysphoria, and yet in transitioning, in being able to do all this, I've become comfortable with my body. I've actually lost my gender dysphoria. I actually feel comfy. I just love living life now. And so isn't that the best result? Isn't that what we're looking for in everything?
I don't know if it is, because we all have like anger and evil within that we have to overcome still. Like, I'm sure you have still dealing with sometimes anger or some type of
Sure.
of issue that you would still have to overcome. And I think that maybe those are the root. I think that the root of anger and sin and evil can crop up in all sorts of different symptoms.
It sounds like what you're saying, though, is that you maybe pushed it down, or the problem's not over, or the problems never end. I mean, I would agree with you that I still deal with hardships and heartbreak and all of the things that we sorrow over. And you get angry and you do things that you regret and apologize for. But I think that's just part of the human experience. I think that, to use a religious term, I think it transcends the biological and transgender.
What transcends the biological?
Trying to become a functional member of society, which I think is what transitioning does. I think it has given me a method. We're all depressed as teenagers, but this was dark hole of soul moment. And after you reach that, you start to dig up. And it has been only up since there. Not saying that it's not like a, up and down, but I would say the trend, I've never been more happy to be part of Western society than right now. I guess I couldn't have been because I wasn't alive, but I am very thankful that I was given the chance to make my inside match my outside. And now I can just do whatever I want.
I'm not taking the right to try to, like, I think we're all groping around in the darkness trying to find solutions to our inner issues. I'm not taking that away from you. I'm just saying that I don't think that it's right, and I do question the people who are pushing this as something that we should be promoting and proud about and stuff like that.
But you would have it be illegal for children.